It's that time once again to be checking in with the 8th Doctor, Liv Chenka and Helen Sinclair. As in today's Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review, we're going to be travelling in time and not so much space, as I'm going to be taking a look at the latest volume as a part of the 8th Doctor Stranded quadrilogy series, which is available to order on the Big Finish website now. The physical CD box set is £24.99 and the download is £19.99. There's also a trailer which can be viewed on the official Doctor Who YouTube channel and Big Finish YouTube channel, as well as additional story details on the Big Finish website. Now, of course, I have previously already reviewed Stranded Volume 1, which did in fact come out, I do believe, around June in 2020, right in the middle of the first COVID lockdown, and here we have the second volume as a part of the series, so it has been quite a long wait to be able to pick up with these characters, as this 8th Doctor series is very different to some of the other 8th Doctor series that we've seen in recent years. That's where I would like to start off this review, because Big Finish do of course offer bundles on the Big Finish website, and if you haven't ordered the first volume of Stranded yet, or if you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend doing so immediately. I recommend going back to the very beginning of this series and listening all the way through, because otherwise you are not really able to pick up the events of this box set and fully appreciate it. So this is definitely a series that I recommend starting in chronological order. And on that note as well, this series does also act as a jumping on point, meaning that Stranded 1 is a brand new chapter within the 8th Doctor era, meaning that you don't have to have listened to Dark Eyes, Doom Coalition or Ravenous in order to enjoy this series. All you simply need to know is it features Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor, Nicola Walker as Liv Chenka, and Hattie Morahan as Helen Sinclair. We have this TARDIS team which, yes, has already been formed. However, to be quite honest, I think that within these two Stranded box sets so far, we've actually seen more development with these companions than we had throughout Doom Coalition and Ravenous. We're definitely upping the game when it comes to character development, and that is really brilliant to see. Let's take a look at the production credits on the Big Finish website. So we have the usual production team, we have the script editors, which are John Dorney and Matt Fitton. The director is Ken Bentley. The music has been rather excellently created by Jamie Robertson, with sound design by Benji Clifford. The producer is David Richardson, and the cover artist is Tom Webster. And as per usual, we have a really lovely cover art this time round, rather in keeping with the theme of the first box set, and the executive producers are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haig Ellery. Now moving on to the actual format of the stories themselves, as this is something that is very different to your other 8th Doctor series that we've had in the past. So we start off with the first episode being Dead Time, as written by Matt Fitton. Then we have episode 2, which is Unit Dating, written by Roy Gill. Episode 3 is Baker Street Irregulars, as written by Lisa McMullen. And then we have the final episode of this volume, which is The Long Way Round, as written by John Dorney. So a really lovely mixture of writers this time round. It is great to see Roy Gill as a part of this series, because he has penned a number of new series stories, as well as a few spin-offs here and there as well, so it's great to see him actually writing for the 8th Doctor, and in particular Unit Dating is a rather standout story for this box set. But when it comes to format, this is a very different version of Doctor Who that you come to expect, and I think especially coming off the bat of Dark Eyes, Doom Coalition and Ravenous, this series is very refreshing, and I'm thankful to have a series of the 8th Doctor that is a little bit more back to basics but still doing things very differently, because this isn't traditional Doctor Who. Each episode of this box set, yes, does different things and has different locations and narratives. However, it's not necessarily that you have an alien that the Doctor and the TARDIS team need to go up against, and by the very end of the story they defeat the alien and go on the way with a plot arc in between. It's a bit more human focused. We have an extended TARDIS team this time round with various supporting characters. The actual plot points that we see, especially throughout this box set, are not necessarily directed around this is the good people, as in the Doctor and his TARDIS team, and this is the bad people, being the alien of the piece. This time round we have human stories about human emotions, and basically humans getting into certain situations and the challenges that that throws up throughout the series. So yes, all 4 of these stories do different things, but they are a part of one grander series. In the original review, I kind of referred to Stranded 1 as being a bit of a soap opera, because it is very much like that. We are in this domestic setting, of course the TARDIS is a bit knackered, and as a result the TARDIS team have needed to start living on Earth in 2020 in the middle of Camden, London. So as a result we've got this house share and the various people throughout the Baker Street flat. So very quickly going over the supporting characters for this series. Number 1, we have Rebecca Root as Tanya Bell. Then we have Tom Price as Sergeant Andy Davison from Torchwood, who becomes an 8th 8th Doctor companion. I think it's mental that a supporting character from Torchwood is now an 8th Doctor companion, and as per usual, Tom Price does an absolutely excellent performance throughout this box set. Then we have the two elderly gentlemen throughout the series who are occupying Baker Street, which are Ron and Tony, and their focus is around unit dating within episode 2. Really lovely development of their characters as we've seen the story split across multiple timelines. As you probably can tell from the cover art, we have the inclusion of the Brigadier as portrayed by John Shaw. So as a result, we have a split narrative with the 1970s, Earthbound 70s Doctor Who, and then we have 2020 Doctor Who and that thread of unit woven throughout the plot itself. Then we have Zakia and Aisha, who are the main focus of the 3rd episode of the box set, as we have a World War themed story, and then we wrap up the box set with basically the regulars of the TARDIS team and a little bit of an interrogation story. So yes, as I mentioned, we are developing all the characters throughout this series, and we have Robin in there as well, who is a teenager who lives with his dad. Has a little bit of a difficult domestic setting surrounding that character, and it's great to see him padded out throughout the story as well. Everybody feels very real, everybody has a story to tell, and I really like that. So very much like the first series of Stranded, there are lots of twists and turns along the way when it comes to characters and narratives and storylines, and as a result I'm going to try and keep this review as vague as possible in parts, because one of the things about this series is those little elements really bring the story together and really excel it to another level. So I'm going to try my best to keep these descriptions to the stories as vague as I can, kind of lacking in those smaller details for you to discover yourself if you decide to listen to this series. Yes, it's one of those ones that definitely keeps you hooked. I think especially given the gap between the original box set, I think we most certainly should have seen this box set a little bit early on to make this gap a little bit less compared to that of Series 1 and Series 2. But that said, as soon as you start listening to this series again, there is very clearly within Episode 1 Dead Time that continuation from the previous box set. It doesn't particularly feel like any time has passed. We're instantly in with this story and kind of picking up after the events of Series 1 Episode 4, which is really lovely. And of course we have the Raquelians in that episode, an invasion of lizard people, and basically they're after the Doctor, and that theme is then continued throughout this series as well. So Dead Time rather excitingly sees the series change a little bit of a different tack, because we get to see the TARDIS now having the power to travel in time but not space. So we get to see the TARDIS going into the far, far, far future, where basically Earth is utterly destroyed and it is this barren alien quarry-esque landscape. And what I really love is the way the TARDIS is depicted throughout this series. The music by Jamie Robertson and the sound design by Benji Clifford is incredible, because basically the TARDIS is struggling quite a lot. So we have the console room, but everything around the console room is visible, so you can actually see out of the TARDIS into the environment surrounding, so you can see everybody passing by in Camden Street, and need to make sure that nobody is looking when they materialise and dematerialise, which is really cool. And it kind of takes Doctor Who back to basics, and especially throughout this series we get the excellent use of that, being able to see out the TARDIS as we see them go back in time to the World Wars, going from this pristine 2020 location into the heart of the Blitz, which is really lovely. The story as well, the opposite way, we get to see the future and basically the TARDIS going into a meltdown and they need to try and get back because there is a concern that they are going to get stranded in the far, far future. The episode does throw up a few plot points about possible different timelines and basically events unfolding, but the most important thing about this story is the characters themselves. You have Robin being a part of the TARDIS team, which is a really lovely touch. It's great to see Helen having a more motherly role. We get to see a lot of Helen throughout this series, in fact, and developments with her character in particular. And likewise, we also have Tanya as well. And this whole story is a little bit difficult for certain companions because we have different companions hiding things from each other. Of course, Sergeant Andy Davison can't say who he is or who he's working for to the Doctor because he creates Torchwood in a later incarnation. You have Tanya and Liv's relationship as well under a little bit of strain because naturally, due to her being a companion of the 8th Doctor, Tanya is keeping things from Liv, so that is very difficult. Meanwhile, I think Helen's just finding the whole situation difficult, bless her. Paul McGann is depicted as a rather stern version of the 8th Doctor, and that's a theme that we see throughout the entirety of this series. He's getting a bit fed up of being stuck in one place, and as a result is craving adventure, and he's taking it out on everybody else. Yes, a really good way to introduce this box set, and it's a bit more sci-fi and a bit more unknown. I quite like it. Next up we have Unit Dating, as written by Roy Gill, and it's another excellent story, really heartwarming. What I love about this episode is we have development of Ron and Tony, the two elderly gentlemen, and what we find out is basically they are unit soldiers. They are unit soldiers from the 70s when the initial Doctor was around, and they've been keeping that from the Doctor throughout the rest of the previous series, which is a really lovely twist. I don't think it's a spoiler to say because it's got the Brigadier in. We've got him on the cover art, of course, John Cole Shaw. I've already commented on this whole concept of recasting certain characters and actors who are no longer with us. We had the Brigadier in The Grey Man of the Mountain, of course, the monthly range release of December 2020. And to be honest, I think that John Cole Shaw does a very good job. I think that even in the first story that I reviewed, The Grey Man of the Mountain, instantly he was in that role. You could sense this retired variation of the Brigadier. This story is different because we get to see the Brigadier in the heart of Unit in the 70s. It's the environment that we are most familiar with this character, and it's otherworldly seeing the Brigadier perform alongside Paul McGann. It's excellent, and it is really of the time, and to be honest, I was half expecting Sergeant Benton and Captain Mike Yates to come through the doors as we have the unit lab, and basically the Doctor wants to go back in time to pick up a certain thing that will help him fix the TARDIS, and as a result we see him employing the company of Sergeant Andy Davison, so we get to see them properly travelling in time together, which is great. It's a lovely relationship, a lovely dynamic, and I think that it's clear that Paul McGann has a lot of fun with this story as well. The way that Roy Gill has written both Ron and Tony in the older variation but also the younger variation is sublime. They're absolutely excellent characters. I love them within the first series because they're elderly, they have different views, and as a result it's intriguing to have them a part of this team because normally we don't have elderly companions, and to be honest, I just want to see them travelling in time more in the future because they're brilliant. And throughout this episode, again, we travel back to the origins of that relationship and the involvement of the Doctor within that, and it's fun, it's really heartwarming. It also highlights the struggles of relationships, especially homosexuality, within the 70s when it was still kind of frowned upon by some aspects of society, so it's great to see Roy bringing that in, and to be honest, it's a lovely heartfelt tale, a really brilliant story with some lovely moments, and equally as well I think that Liv and Helen do a great job dealing with the 2020 version of Tony and Ron, as we see Ron's memories being affected by the events that are unfolding back in the 70s, and that concept is rather intriguing of what we don't usually see within Doctor Who. The Doctor comes in a situation, he can change time. What happens to those people that are currently living those exact memories and kind of their own mind being changed whilst the events are happening, and especially the negative effects of the Doctor's impact on the universe and the whole concept of memory loss. Again, a lovely story, very gripping, with lots of excellent moments, both excellently performed and written. Then we have the Baker Street Irregulars, as written by Lisa McMullen. Now this is an intriguing one because we go back to the World Wars, and again we have this whole concept of time travel and people, and basically what happens if you change something in the past and how does that affect the present. Of course, the beauty of Doctor Who and time travel. So this episode, as I have already mentioned, does of course focus around Aisha and Zakia, who are two other occupants within the Baker Street house, and we of course see them go back in time to that of World War II, and not just any time during World War II, but Baker Street during World War II, and as a result we have a personal link as we get to see Nisha, as portrayed by Angie Mahindra, who does of course also play Rani within the Sarah Jane Adventures, and we basically have that personal family link of their grandma and witnessing their grandma basically doing things as she is younger, in fact the same age as them pretty much, but being an agent as a part of the World War and acting in the heart of Germany for the British efforts back in the UK, being of course an agent and a spy who's tipping off little bits of information. And what we find out is that her involvement is in fact a little bit more dramatic than what they first expected. She's not just somebody typing away at the keys in an office, she's in fact, boom, in the middle of Germany, in fact directly helping the UK war effort in taking down Hitler. We get to see events unfold throughout this story that are very difficult, in particular for Helen, which is one of the biggest praiseworthy things I think for this box set, because we dig deep on Helen as a character. We get to see her saying a little bit about her family in the past, we get to see her talking about her relationship with her mother, and in particular a line that stood out to me was Helen saying conscription was the best thing that happened in our family in order to get her father out of the situation and away from the family home, and it is superb to see her character being padded out. In particular, a woman, of course, from the 1960s, she already has a little bit of a period struggle being living in 2020. Of course, technology is still not her forte. She's getting used to it over time, but actually being fixed within this location at one time is having a struggle upon her mentally, I think, and we see a few links to that throughout this series. I think she's a really lovely companion, and I think that Stranded has most definitely benefited her character massively, and same for Liv as well. Seeing her relationship unfold with Tanya has really added a personal aspect to her character that we've not seen for the other 8th Doctor quadrilogies. I really love listening to Stranded now, having also got the context of the Robots series. Of course, seeing Liv being the central protagonist, it's really made me respect Liv a lot more as a companion, and to be honest, I think this TARDIS team is excellent together. They're a great dynamic. I really grew to appreciate them, especially over Stranded. Something that I really felt from the Baker Street Irregulars was that sense of drama, and it was definitely a very tense and deadly story. In particular, we have World War II being depicted in a way that I suppose is rather truthful to what actually happened. It's a very grim, awful environment, and what I like is the 8th Doctor, again, is being very stern. He's kind of introducing this area as something like a field trip. He in fact refers to it as that within the early half of the story, because they need to vacate 2020 for a while, so he decides to take the Baker Street team back in time for a little bit of a history lesson. And he kind of opens the doors to the TARDIS and goes, World War II, the Blitz, and then starts yabbering on like how he usually does, showing off, and he kind of for a moment forgets that Helen is from the 1960s and she has lived every single moment of this war already. And there's kind of a moment that she says that I've lived through all of this, meanwhile you're simply just a tourist who's coming in every so often and popping away safely again. And I think that's a really great moment for both her character, but also showing how the 8th Doctor is not necessarily thinking straight. He seems to be a little bit hopping from situation to situation, trying to distract himself as much as possible without realising the impact of his words on others. And throughout this story we see him having a more hands-on approach. He takes on kind of a mission of his own, especially in relation to the World War, jumping out of planes, sort of being within Germany, which is quite cool. It's a nice sort of mission story whilst other characters and emotions are being developed kind of along the side. We hop between scene to scene with the different companions, and overall it works very well. And I'm going to move on to the next story before I say too much. And now we move on to the final episode of the series, which is of course The Long Way Round, as written by John Dorney. Now in the previous box set, John Dorney also written another episode which was called Wild Animals. I've just needed to check because I knew I'd probably get it wrong. But in both of these episodes, we get to see him doing something that you won't necessarily expect. This is an odd one. This is one of those stories that I'm still not quite sure what to make of it now, because the entire episode basically takes the form of a police interrogation. And even throughout behind the scenes at the end of this episode, John Dorney talks about communication and how a lot of TV dramas at the minute are focusing very much on communication between people. And it may sound ridiculous because all programmes feature people talking to each other, but there's a lot of media at the minute that is talking about two people together, simply one person talking to another for quite a long period of time, as opposed to having lots of scenes going on at the same time. We're having a long scene with just two people. In particular, one of the references that he makes throughout behind the scenes is Line of Duty, and for those of you that know me, you will know I adore Line of Duty, and that is of course a police drama that relies a lot on interrogation, police interviews and communication between different people, and this episode takes on that format. See the Baker Street team basically taken into the future, into 2050. Meanwhile, they are being interrogated because quite evidently they are not people from this time period, and they have in fact time travelled, and somebody wants to figure out why they've come from 2020 and what their intentions are, and if the Doctor is indeed a good person. So again, we get to see the companions of this piece being of course Tanya Bell, Liv Chenka, Helen Sinclair and Sergeant Andy Davison, all being focused on in a rather microscopic level, dealing with their relationship with the Doctor, but also getting a bit personal as well. With the interrogation scene between Tanya Bell and the person who's carrying out the interview, she starts to talk about her past and who she was before being Tanya Bell, and that whole concept of gender and identity. And the person giving the interview was almost going to refer to her as who she once was prior to her transition, almost as an insult, and then she goes, "Don't you dare." And again, it's a very brief moment, however it's very powerful and drills home on that human aspect that this series has intertwined throughout all of the stories. And of course this review would not be complete without talking about Tom Baker as the Curator. Who is the Curator? God knows. God knows who he is. It seems that every single scene the Curator is in, he kind of just adds to the baffledness that I feel about this character, because we see him being brilliant as per usual. I always think that the Curator, he's very much like Tom. He's very charismatic, however at the same time he's a bit like a magician. He's very mystical and he'll just say things, and you can imagine if this was a visual TV show, that glint in his eye just always there, knowing everything, however you not knowing everything, and you are very much in the unknown, but because he knows everything you feel that sense of security. And as a result we see him talking to a child throughout this story, because she has noticed the weird blue box thing that is vanishing from the end of Camden Street. So when they've been looking out to materialise and dematerialise, they've clearly not been looking hard enough, because a little girl has been watching the entire time, and she's curious as to what this box is and how these people can go into it and then fly away presumably and then come back. So yes, we have the Curator kind of monitoring the situation, and you feel like he is somebody from another dimension, almost up there, like a godly figure who can basically whip anything out of thin air. He is very much a magician who does in fact do a few magic tricks here and there in order to coax around the girl to talk to him and to basically say what she is feeling about this box, and he's lovely. I think that Tom carries his performance very, very well. It's refreshing to see him not in a role that isn't the Fourth Doctor, but somebody that still has a few traits to that of the Fourth Doctor in there, kind of that glint of character and emotion and fun. I think that that's certainly there, but also that reflection of somebody who has seen a lot. There's certainly an added level to his performance, and it's great to see it unfold throughout this episode. And I love the fact that the more he appears, we still are none of the wiser of who the hell he is. Once again, I'm purposely being very, very vague when it comes to the long way around, because I don't want to reveal what this story is fully about. However, what you can know about the episode, without knowing too much, is that we are basically questioning the Doctor's identity and the Doctor's motives, and if he is indeed a good person. Is he hiding something? And that ties in with the themes of all the other characters throughout this series. You have Tanya and we have Sergeant Andy Davison, who have these links to Torchwood. The other characters can't know about Torchwood, in particular the Doctor. Then you have Helen, that is kind of having her own personal difficulties, which I imagine we'll see more of within the next series. Then we have Liv, that is trying to tackle the feelings of a relationship, whilst also simultaneously knowing that her relationship is kind of based on somebody who is hiding a lot from her. Then you have the Doctor, that is clearly being rather absent because he just wants to be travelling in space and time. So this series is all around knowledge and character and interactions and what people are hiding from each other. So yes, this episode certainly contributes to that overall. I'm looking forward to see where this series goes next, because the thing with Stranded is you can't particularly predict it. So in conclusion, for Stranded 2, once again another rather strong box set with some great character moments and some excellent storytelling, excellently written across all 4 stories. As I mentioned at the very start of this review, if you are intrigued by what I've said throughout this review, take a look at Stranded 1 before taking a look at Stranded 2, because you will not be able to fully appreciate the storyline without witnessing the series from the entirety at the very outset within Series 1, Episode 1. So thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week, from Big Finish audio drama reviews, book reviews, product reviews, and much, much more. On that note, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.